Right, let's do a wee wrap-up video for March 2025 in this beautiful location. So rather than be at my desk where I usually am, I'm going to be outside. The first one was The Lost History of Liberalism by Helena Rosenblatt, audiobook narrated by XE Sands. This was a group read on the Historathon Discord. It was okay. I almost DNF'd it because I got to one point about halfway through where I was like, I'm not really taking this in. So it's really the kind of book that I should have sat down with a physical copy and a notebook, made notes. But I didn't. And I read it and yeah, it was good. But I didn't love it, so I gave it 3 stars. Yeah, that's all I've got to say about that one. Next one was The Dispossessed, Ursula K. Le Guin. This was a group read with Jared Henderson on commonplace philosophy, and I thoroughly enjoyed this one. Gave it 5 stars. Jared led the group and had a couple of Zoom calls, which I meant to go on the second one of and missed. And I haven't watched the replay, so I don't know what was said about it. But it's the kind of book that you read and then you want to go back to the beginning and read again because it's got so much going on. Sort of dystopian sci-fi with ideas of socialism versus capitalism set in a kind of scientific or in an interplanetary system which has Earth and another planet. It was a fascinating, interesting, really deep, enjoyable book. And since then I've been listening to Mythgard Academy, who did a series of lectures on this, so I've been going through them and getting a lot out of that as well. So 5-star read with that one. Next one was The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, which I bought for my daughter's birthday, which came up earlier in March. And because I don't like to give books away that I haven't read myself, I had to read it and I had to read it quick, which was just as well it was a short book. So I did that and enjoyed it, and I've made a video all about that, so I don't really need to discuss it anymore other than to say that I gave it 4 stars. So you can check out my review video and yeah, hear what I thought about it. Next, Bleak House by Charles Dickens. So one of my goals in my 50s and beyond is to read all of Dickens. This is only the 2nd Dickens novel I've read, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. Took me a bit to get into, so much so that I actually started watching the TV adaptation just to get a handle on the characters and the plot as well, I suppose, because there's a lot of characters in it and a lot of ins and a lot of outs, a lot of what have yous. So I caught up, I was probably about a quarter of the way through, watched the TV show up to where I was, and then carried on reading it a chapter a day, and boy oh boy, what an amazing book. I'm in for a real treat with reading the rest of Dickens, I think. So this was a 5-star. I did have the audiobook narrated by Mary and Margolese, but I ended up ditching that in favour of eyeballing it. So yeah, good times. Next up, Crime and Punishment. So I've been reading this for over a year. Started it as a group read on Storygraph and then restarted it as a group read on my Substack. And I finished it in March. I was writing regular posts on it, which I've yet to finish. I've got the last 2 chapters and the epilogue to write up, so that will be coming soon. But I mean, obviously this is a 5-star. You know, this is the Roger Cockrell translation. I've just got another translation of his for White Guard by Bulgakov, which I'm planning to read probably starting in May, and I'm probably going to do another Substack group read type thing. So if you're interested in reading a Bulgakov novel that isn't The Master and Margarita, hit me up, check out my Substack and you can join that. And yeah, we'll be reading that from May onwards, nice and slow. 5 stars obviously. Okay, next up we've got another Historathon read. So this was one that I heard about through the Honestly podcast on the Free Press, where author Tom Holland was interviewed by Barry Weiss. Dominion, Tom Holland, The Making of the Western Mind. This is an incredibly dense book. I had the audio book narrated by Mark Meadows, but I did start out reading it a chapter at a time, taking notes, and then I kind of fell off that a bit, so I didn't get as much out of it as I would have liked to have. Taking notes and reading slowly is the way to get through a dense book like this and to take in all its information. But I think it's also the kind of book that you read more than once. In fact, I'm finding that now about most books. So yeah, I ended up just blasting through it to finish it and check the box, which is, it's not ideal. I gave it 4 stars because I thought it was superb, really well written, really well researched. Tom Holland is a bit of a giant in the current climate with podcasting and with the prolific books that he's bringing out and interviews that he's doing and stuff. So yeah, it's a very, very, very interesting book. Sunday Times bestseller. Yeah, recommended and probably one for me to return to. Did I say 4 stars? Yes, 4 stars. Next up is another group read on Reading with Rebecca Nicole's Discord. It's getting a bit shugly in the wind, isn't it? So this is a very interesting book indeed. Sci-fi, and I have a gorgeous copy of it, a folio edition, no less. It's just gorgeous, gorgeous book. Look at that. You still don't know what it is yet, do you? You read that. Roadside Picnic by the Strugatsky brothers. I've been a fan of the movie adaptation of this book since I was in Odessa for a year back in 95-96, when the landlady of the apartment I was living in came into my room and said, "You need to watch this movie that's on telly right now, Stalker." Watched the movie, I was like, OMG, this is unbelievable. I've seen it many, many times since, but I'd never read the book. So, seeing this come up as a folio edition, I was like, yeah, I just have to get that. It's very different from the film. The premise is the same. It's about aliens who came to Earth one day and then left loads of junk behind. And the areas where they left the junk become kind of like radioactive zones, and they're called zones. And into those zones go stalkers who go and retrieve the space junk, and it does lots of wonderful things, interesting things, things that can be exploited to make money. So the stalkers get quite well paid to take people in to retrieve the junk, and there's a black market for the junk. The government want to get their hands on it. Things like perpetual batteries, for example. I mean, who wouldn't want that, right? So that's what it's about, and I just loved the book. I just loved it. It was, yeah, as I said, it was different from the movie, and I think they both stand alone very well as independent pieces of art based on the same idea, but from the foundations up they become very different things. So I'm going to recommend both of them. Did I give it 5? No, I gave it 4 stars. It's not necessarily one I need to read again, so I take that back, what I said earlier. This one was quite an easy read, quite a fast read. It's quite a fast-paced book, and it jumps forward in time. Each chapter, there's maybe 10 or 15 years will have passed since the previous one, so it moves forward very fast. And yeah, if you like sci-fi and you like dystopian ideas and ideas of such as you would get in the Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin, you know, this has got some social science kind of ideas. So does Roadside Picnic, and it's called Roadside Picnic because the idea comes up that the aliens came to Earth for a picnic, just as you would do driving a long distance and stopping at the roadside, having a picnic and then leaving all your litter behind and then buggering off. That's what the title comes from. Obviously the movie is based on the stalkers who take people into the zones. So, right, Roadside Picnic, We've got 2 more to go. Next one is another Historathon read. Catherine the Great and Potemkin, or Potemkin as he's known in the English-speaking world. Some of you will know that I'm a big fan of Russia, former Soviet Union, countries, history, politics, language, culture, etc. I'd never read a book by Sebag, as he's known. I know that from the Empire podcast, where he was a guest, and he was introduced as Sebag. It was Simon Sebag Montefiore. This follows Catherine the Great of Russia, Catherine II. Her stealing of power, or taking of power, and then her rise, her reign, and her love affair with Potemkin, who became her lover and husband, or did he? As a kind of secret marriage, and no certificate was ever found, so it's like, was he not? And then, you know, he breaks down a lot of the myths, like the idea that Catherine is pretty famous for having taken lots of lovers, for being a bit of a slapper. But really that wasn't the case. She had a big heart and she fell in love, and that's how she was. So she did have affairs and stuff, but they were affairs of the heart, not of passion. Or is that the same thing? I don't know if that makes sense. But she wasn't a slapper, I think is what I'm trying to say. And also the idea of Potemkin villages, which you might have heard of, as a thing where the idea was that wherever Catherine was going, say she's going down a canal, Potemkin would go out and build facades of towns and villages along the river bank, the canal bank, to make it look like he'd built these towns and cities and villages, when in actual fact he hadn't. It was just make-believe, made to look like towns and villages. And that gets used in our current parlance as a way of saying something that's not real, something that has no solidity to it. It's just a facade. And apparently it wasn't true. What I loved reading about most in this was about Odessa and about Deriba, who was one of the founders of Odessa, because you know, I lived there for a year, and I loved that city. I was there 95, 96 when it was still very wild. You know, the wall hadn't long come down, so it was crazy times. They had a currency that didn't last very long. It was called coupons, Karabovanets, Karabovanci. The state was in turmoil. And that's another thing we learn about, is about Crimea, about Sevastopol, about the building of the Black Sea Fleet. This is all things that Potemkin was responsible for. And so we learn about how the Crimean Peninsula was taken from the Ottomans, and so it wasn't really a country as such, it was part of the Russian Empire. So it's an interesting bit of history that, you know, a lot of people don't seem to know about in the current situation that's going on over there. The war, the special operation, all of that stuff. So it's just interesting to get some history about that area, that region, that, you know, gives a bit of background on what's going on now. So that was Catherine the Great and Potemkin. I gave it 4 stars. Narrated by Sophie Roberts, if you get the audiobook, which is what I did. Again, it's one of these where I would like to go through it with notes. It's very dense, but it's very readable. It follows a story. It's really fun to read. It's not dry and boring and dull like history books can be. It's very, actually entertaining, the way that it's written. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. I do have a bunch of other Sebag books on my shelf, including all 3 of these that are on the back here. Young Stalin, Stalin the Court of the Red Tsar, and the Romanovs. I've got all of them to come. Not sure when, but we'll get there. So that's what, 8 books. Finally, Silver on the Tree by Susan Cooper. You'll see it still as a bookmark in, because I listened to the audiobook as I was doing garden work and it didn't really sink in properly, so I want to eyeball read it again This is the fifth and final book in the Dark is Rising sequence by Susan Cooper. So it's young adult fantasy, books which I read as a teenager and I'm returning to now as not a teenager, very much not a teenager. And I'm going to do I'll probably do a review as well on video, but I'm planning to write a piece for my Substack about these 5 books because I think that would be interesting for me. And so that's why I'm eyeball reading it, just to take it in again and take it in more closely than I did when I was doing the garden work. So that's us. 9 books in March, 3 of which were Q1 reads. So Bleak House and the 2 history books, Dominion and Catherine the Great and Potemkin. So that's why March is a bit heavier in finished books than February was, partly. And also the read-alongs, you know, the Dispossessed, Ursula K. Le Guin was a very fast read, as was the Roadside Picnic. So that was me. Hope you enjoyed this different format style, sitting out here. I hope the wind wasn't too strong and that the microphone wind muff did its job adequately. And yeah, that's me for now. Speak to you later, folks. Bye.